Today we are here with the Borough of Hounslow and Victoria Lawson and Wayne Stephenson. I am particularly interested in looking at the Borough of Hounslow, not just as a model for boroughs in London, but also for neighborhoods and communities in New York and around the world. They have done some very innovative things in response to COVID and have some very interesting things on the horizon. So welcome, Wayne and Victoria. Tell us a little bit about Hounslow and your role there.
So Hounslow, it's based in West London, and we go from zone 2 to zone 6 if you've ever been on the tube. So we're a really long, narrow borough, and we neighbour Heathrow Airport, and therefore Heathrow Airport is a large part of what our economy is about. We also have about 186 different languages spoken in Hounslow, so we tend to see ourselves as the world in one place. And I'm Victoria Lawson, and I'm the Executive Director for Environment, Culture and Customer Services.
So, Hounslow, as Victoria has described, we're very much of the view that we are an outstanding borough, and our public are absolutely intrinsic to that, and really we are a really strong borough. We aim to be a outstanding council to serve them, to serve our 280,000 constituents in the best way possible. And I have the privilege of being the Director of Environment and Climate Change for Hounslow. So I look after a lot of our environmental plans and services and strategies, but particularly our response to the climate emergency, and we've developed our action plan around that, and also a green recovery, which is very much about sort of this aim of trying to respond to the pandemic in a green way.
So in New York, we would call that Queens. That is our borough that has a number of different languages. Do you have any anecdotes or just ways that you think about servicing that many different people in relation to the COVID response, or how you're thinking about climate in the future?
Yeah, so one of the big challenges for us through the COVID pandemic was the significant impact it had on our communities. And so at one point we had almost 40% of our working age population on furlough. As a result of the pandemic. And some of the work that we've done is to map the different communities and the different impact, whether that's based on employment, health inequalities, to really understand, I guess, the impact of COVID. And unsurprisingly, the west of our borough, which neighbours Heathrow, was the part that was most significantly impacted. And in part, that's why, and that particular area of Hounslow is an area where we've focused our attention around our green recovery response and developing a low carbon neighbourhood, because we really want to be able to build back with a really green economic sort of heart, recognising that the resilience of our borough needs to be significantly more diverse in terms of its economy, to make sure that we're resilient enough for any future shocks.
Talking about learning from other places or working with other cities, let's go to the other side of the pond, to Paris, to think about what Mayor Anne Hidalgo has implemented there and some of the things they're working on with the 15-minute city. I've heard a lot of anecdotes about a resurgence of small businesses like coffee shops in neighborhoods because people aren't commuting as much. How are you guys thinking about this concept of the 15-minute city?
Thanks, Simon. So the way we're thinking about the 15-minute city in Hounslow is we're thinking about how we create low carbon neighbourhoods. So as you can imagine, London is highly connected. And actually a number of our populations already live within a certain distance of key assets. So coupled with that theory coming out of Paris on the 15-minute neighbourhood and our climate ambition, the piece of work that we've been leading on and are particularly proud of is the work we've been doing around creating low carbon neighbourhoods. So we've begun, and Wayne will be able to talk about this more, looking at a particular part or set of neighbourhoods in Cranford and Heston. So that's in the west part of the borough, mostly impacted or more significantly impacted by COVID, as a way of using that to sort of kickstart a range of different pieces of work that we want to do, whether that's around green skills, green economy, mobility and transport, thinking about the work that Paris have done, and also right at the heart of it, how we can do that with our communities and with our businesses. And we're going to pause because Wayne's going to have loads he wants to add to this.
So I think thinking about the 15-minute model, we know that that's being adopted in sort of different guises across the globe, really, from Melbourne to Paris to Malmo and other places. And obviously there are earlier iterations of those neighbourhood development models, which indeed, certainly in London, do exist. You spoke about the resurgence of local businesses, and we've also been seeing that, and we're thinking very holistically about how we support those local businesses to develop, because we see them as absolutely critical to achieving that 15-minute model. But at the same time, we have to be very cautious, because 15-minute model in itself can be a barrier for some individuals as well. So we're having to think very clearly about how the infrastructure interacts around the borough and how we might sort of create new models to overcome some of those sort of traditional neighbourhood barriers, particularly for our disabled community and ageing community. I think these aspects are absolutely critical, and we need to ensure that they feature strongly as part of the neighbourhood approach. What I would say is, in terms of thinking about the development of a low carbon neighbourhood, we absolutely consider one of the pillars to be an accessible natural environment, and we know that one of the pillars is that we create a new fair green economy and economic growth. Health and access to health and social justice is absolutely critical, and how we map the green agenda to achieve those wider social benefits is really important as well. And we mustn't forget that strive towards the net zero carbon, which absolutely Hounslow is committed to achieving a net zero borough by 2030. All of this has to sort of work together in our wider strategies around our town centres and how they're placed, and how our local shopping districts interact with the neighbourhoods in which individuals live. And for that, hyperlocality really is the essence of that program. We have to come up with bespoke developments, changes in our infrastructure to overcome some of these traditional barriers that exist. And we're going to be doing that through a series of demonstrators, so creating new cycle hubs, new green corridors, which are both travel and nature recovery corridors. We're developing a holistic plan around green infrastructure across the borough, so that strategy will inform how we green our urban grey spaces, but also develop our parks and all of those traditional open spaces as contributing to that net zero journey. What's really important about all of these factors is that some early studies are showing that at the neighbourhood level is the potential to unlock the investment that's required to achieve that very wide infrastructure development that we need to achieve across our neighbourhoods, such as some of those factors that are being looked at in London, the retrofit, the decarbonising of our public buildings, as well as homes, private or social homes, and how people sort of travel around the borough, and how we create an infrastructure that is set so that we can address things like hydrogen tech development, as well as more sort of electric vehicle infrastructure.
So building upon that, I think one of the key things for us is how we make these neighbourhoods quite polycentric, and how we think about how the neighbourhoods connect from one to another, also going to that point about how diverse Hounslow is. So each neighbourhood communities are different, and we want to make sure that we've got that characterisation of those neighbourhoods in those low carbon places, also using it as a way of tackling some of the deep rooted inequalities, and using the green recovery as a way of responding to and addressing some, I guess, deep rooted issues that we have within different communities across Hounslow, and I guess also across London and wider cities.
We have a big room of urban technologists and urbanists and the next great entrepreneurs in urban technology. Is there a specific problem or area of issues that you think that they should be focusing their energy on as we look for the next great innovations for neighborhoods and boroughs?
So in terms of areas or problems that we would love the innovators and the tech innovators to look at, I think this comes in different forms. I think there's still great strides to be made in terms of developing our infrastructure across boroughs. I think in terms of the local approaches, the solutions for local waste management, local energy management, local circular economy are areas that are ripe for further innovation, particularly from a tech sense. I think we will continue to see tech development in terms of transport, and in Hounslow, we've been supporting sort of the exploration of future transport means, be that sort of an assessment of how hydrogen will work in the future and how it will work to support our fleet, but not only our fleet of transport that is obviously interconnected with the London network. And I think another area where we consider that there's greater strides to be made is in terms of the infrastructure that can help enable us to break down and lower actually digital exclusion, because we still see pockets of digital exclusion within the borough, and I think sort of there's greater thinking about how we can overcome these inequalities and the entrenched inequalities that have occurred through the previous economic system, and how we can overcome that as we progress further with this green agenda.
So,
Victoria, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so I might look at it slightly differently. So just in terms of me for the next big urban tech and things I'd encourage people to look at, actually I still think some of it is the basics, the things that we would want to see. So I think one of the challenges we have around looking at neighbourhoods is around data. And if we think about the way in which we're going to have to create connectivity at a neighbourhood level, in a way in which we, I guess you could argue we've struggled to at a citywide level, how do we make sure that we've got the right underpinning data so that we can see the whole neighbourhood system? I think we've built city level systems. I haven't yet seen and would love to see a neighbourhood level system, and how we can take the work that we've done in Hounslow to create a low carbon neighbourhood and really put the tech data solution behind that, so that if you pull and implement lever A, what the outcome would be, versus pulling lever B and seeing a different outcome, and knowing where you're going to get the most advantage around some of the choices that we will need to make at pace as cities and as boroughs within cities if we're going to respond to the climate emergency challenge. Because I think the other challenge that we have is like how you get communities motivated, so like they understand, say for example, like the climate emergency, they have a concept about what that means. Like, how do you get them motivated around getting to net zero? What does that mean for them locally? And like being able to describe that picture for neighborhoods is just so important, because you can describe it like what you might be able to do as an individual, but if you think about it as a collection of people in a particular part, what do they need to collectively do? And I think that's the you hear, we'll hear it today, won't we, on over the next fortnight about COP26, what we need to do as nations, what we need to do as cities, what you might be able to do as an individual, but the whole, like, what can we do in my neighbourhood, my street?
Yeah,
I think that's the bit that's missing. It'd be brilliant if there's some urbanists. And if you think about it like a tapestry, like the neighbourhood is kind of like the double stitch, is the fine stitch in the middle that holds it all together, because if you don't get that right, you can create something but ultimately it will just fall apart. So the neighborhood bit is like, I don't know how to describe it, I'm not very good at sewing, but it's kind of like the lining and the double stitching that just really tightens everything together.
It's absolutely the important basis that individuals engage upon as well. For them to you know, they'll often engage at a local neighborhood level, be that through a range of initiatives, but they need to be able to see the results of that and the contribution that they're making to the net zero challenge, for them to be motivated and empowered to make those changes that they need to make in lifestyle or journey choices and things like that. So that neighborhood piece is absolutely critical, and to understand how that neighborhood ticks is really important, and that's why local government is so important in that sort of tapestry as well, to continue the sewing theme.